What's up, narrators? This is Mo, and we are back with the Narratives Per Possession podcast, where we connect you to better basketball narratives. And I am excited for tonight's episode, where we are getting into a team that, honestly, year to year never has a shortage of storylines to discuss. And certainly just today, right? Plenty of new stories there. Unfortunately, on the injury front for the team. And the team we're talking about tonight is the Philadelphia 76ers. They've had some highs, they've had some lows this season. Right now, it looks like it's heading on a downward slope. And so, to help me talk about this team tonight, I'm honored to welcome tonight. We have a member directly from the Sixers beat. He writes Sixers coverage for Sixers on SI, that's Sports Illustrated. Without further ado, I want to bring to the stage Mr. Austin Krell. Austin, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, really intrigued. I don't know. There's a lot of superlatives. There's a lot of words we could be using to describe the Sixers, and that's just that's just how that franchise works. And you know it well. You've been covering the team for many seasons now at this point. Where I didn't expect to honestly start, but we have to start because this, it's breaking news as of this afternoon, right? So injuries have already mounted for this team, and yet another one now is being added to the list. So today, Sixers release a update that Kelly Oubre, Sixers wing, is now sidelined for at least 2 weeks due to MRI that revealed a sprain suffered in his lateral collateral ligament of his left elbow. So let's just start there. Like the perspective of now not having Kelly Oubre for a few weeks, like what does that really do to this Sixers team at this point in the season?
It takes one of their better perimeter defenders off the floor, one of their go-to skilled scorers. Even for his limitations, he is still a very steady 17 points a game. And I think just one of their heartbeats, he's a very clearly a excellent, one of their better athletes. And, they could use his size on the wings on both ends of the floor, but just the spirit that he brings to game to game, the energy, the effort, the professionalism of we could be down 16, we could be down 4. I'm going to give you the same effort no matter what. And so I think just having him being out, it's a major loss, especially in the context of you don't have Joel or Tyrese or Paul
And so we'll certainly talk about those three gentlemen as well. But right off the bat, a day or so ago, there's also the announcement for Tyrese Maxey, right? He sustained a sprained finger, and now that's sidelining him for 3 weeks. It's quite possible. Depending on what it looks like once the Sixers reach that reevaluation point, Maxey may not even be back until hypothetically or optimistically a postseason appearance at this point, because there are now, the Sixers have. Looking at their schedule, yesterday's game against the Grizzlies was game 65 of the season, right? So, the Sixers have 14 games left of the season. Their last game of the regular season is going to be on April 12th, right? So you hope Maxey's back healthy and ready to go for whatever sort of run the Sixers make at this point. They're 8th seed in the East, so it's likely a play-in run at this point. But it does not look good with these injuries.
Yeah, the grace that they do have, the sort of the last bullet they have in their chamber is Joel should be getting back soon. I say it with a deep sigh because you never quite know. From his oblique injury, and he is by far the biggest singular game changer they have. He's the one guy that can change an entire game on the team by himself. And so they should have him coming back soon. They're about to go on a West Coast road trip that features Utah and Sacramento, as you're saying before. So there are some games there that Joel should be able to impact by his, not by his lonesome, but heavily on his own. I do think that any hope of them tanking their way out of the play-in, or even like out of the play-in, is unrealistic. The Bucks are 10 games under 500, and it could just take another loss or two before they're like, well, that's it. Like, we're not like we should shut down and obviously head towards the lottery. But even if they don't, like, they're not good enough. So it would take a colossal losing streak and a colossal winning streak by the Bucks to flip that. So worst case scenario for them, it seems like play-in is the logical avenue.
Yeah. I mean, there seems to be a solid like floor forming as far as the play-in as well. The Charlotte Hornets have really become like a upstart surprise at this point. I mean, they're 500 in the 10th seed, so barring a catastrophic injury on their front as well, I mean, they probably should, at least that should be their floor at this point. And the Hawks seem to, since they've done their big trade deadline moves, they're probably solidly in that play-in as well. So it's more just, it's going to be intriguing to see what happens. Certainly, getting Joel Embiid back on the floor. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit as well. I mean, that will be interesting because there are always different dynamics traditionally in like the Embiid era of like, what a non-Embiid minutes roster looks like for the Sixers versus not, having him on the court, especially now with, sort of the trajectory that Tyrese Maxey is taking this season.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the two most potent. I mean, when they've been available, they've been one of the most potent duos in the league. I don't think there's. I think if they are, I think people are rightfully skeptical about their ability to get healthy. But if they do get healthy at the right time, that's a nuisance of a duo to have to deal with in any playoff series. And I mean, I think while it's obviously a curse that Tyrese Maxey is not available at the moment, if they do find themselves in a playoff series, he's led the league in minutes per game basically all season long. It is no stretch to say that getting him off his feet for a couple weeks could be a major help for them come playoff time, come any series. And so while I do think it's like a disadvantage, obviously, there's no denying those two and how good they are together on offense. They're a juggernaut. I've seen, I mean, even before Tyrese's ascent to superstardom, I've seen them do some pretty incredible things together. So that would be the hope.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, on that, just to then, I suppose, delve a bit deeper into, thinking about their own possibilities with the Sixers roster right now, and perhaps looking for some opportunities for hope in the middle of, some unwelcome news. Sixers, they play a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday, split the difference between those two games. I would love to get your thoughts on the games. I watched both of the back-to-back games. I have my own thoughts. But that certainly, at least to the point you're making about, in Tyrese Maxey's absence, it's an opportunity for him to, perhaps rest, be healthy for a postseason run of some sort. And then, the Sixers, they get some extended run with, more of like, I would assume middle to back of the rotation guys, right?
Yeah, so I think a couple candidates, especially with Kelly out now, Jabari Walker, Justin Edwards, and I do think like those are pretty good opportunities just for, if no other reason, those two have been, since the start of February, Jabari and Justin have been two of the team's best three-point shooters by attempts per minute. And so like they traded Jared McCain. He was number one. The next two were Jabari and Justin. This team is desperately lacking any kind of shooting. So if you can find a way to get just any kind of shooting on the floor around Joel, I think that is that maybe it doesn't make your life better because you're still probably not better than the absence of Kelly Oubre, but you are creating opportunities in different ways because you're just adding more shooting to the equation.
Absolutely. And that was the thing that probably just jumped out me immediately when I was watching the Monday game. The Sixers played against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The shooting was just ice cold. And I mean, the Cavs were also pretty cold. In the first quarter, Sixers shot 35% from the field in that first quarter. And it just seemed like a very tough outing for any kind of shooting rhythm to happen for the Sixers in that game. The question that kind of popped in my head while I was watching that game is like, okay, so also for context, like VJ Edgecombe was sidelined from that game, right? So you had no Edgecombe, you had no Maxey, so it just seemed to be like a real shortage of creation, and effectively the Sixers rely on Oubre and I suppose Quentin Grimes to be those creators, but that's just, I don't know if those guys have that kind of juice to generate that offensive load. The question is that I had watching that first game was like, who's up next, basically after Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid? Because that seems to be a real concern now at this point. Now, given what the stretch is going to look like.
Well, I would say this. Number one, VJ Edgecombe had some pretty encouraging moments last night as the lead ball handler. That was really like his first career game as the unquestioned, unequivocal number one ball handler, and I thought he handled it pretty well. So I do think like he is in line to step up. But quite frankly, like the theme of this season, whether Joel has been available, whether Tyrese Paul has been available, like one of the reasons they have not been consistently excellent is, and I think like the biggest microcosm of that is the third quarters. They've been like a horrendous, historically awful third quarter team this year. I think part of that is like their offense just sputters into this mess of nothingness for 12 minutes, and then it finds they're either down too much anyway for it to matter, or it finds its juice in the fourth quarter and they win. But I think like underneath all of that is like they just have not been very creative on offense, and a lot of like DHO, a lot of pick and roll, a lot of isolation. They don't expand the offense to the second side of the floor very much. There's not a lot of cutting, not a lot of screening, not a lot of movement, not a lot of like inverted action, not a lot of like leveraging skills to create opportunities elsewhere. Which was a whole part of like why Jared McCain to them is expendable, albeit to the outrage of the fans, like because they were like, all he's doing is sitting in the corner for us. And yeah, you didn't use him very well, but also like there was no future here for him with VJ and Tyrese. But that's besides the point. Like I think Nick Nurse is one of the guys who you can say needs to step up. Like they're just not nearly creative enough on offense. And I mean, I don't buy the whole like they're not talented enough. There are teams around the league every day that are winning games without being all that talented. They're just doing it because they're regimented. They're trained very well. They're coached very well. They run very good sets, and they're NBA players at the end of the day who can make open shots and can score at the rim. And it isn't that hard to manufacture some stuff out of that. So I think beyond Joel, beyond VJ, beyond Quentin, in the absence of your Paul George, of your Tyrese Maxey, of your Kelly Oubre, you have to like it's time to dust off the clipboard and draw some things up here a little bit.
Yeah. And it seems like perhaps maybe, in the second game with second game against the Memphis Grizzlies, I definitely saw that third quarter lull where it seemed like that game almost was going to get out of hand. I mean, I would say to the Sixers' credit, they were consistent in getting to the line that kept them in striking distance to then have that campaign fourth quarter that really like turned it around and ultimately got the win. To your point, it seems like given some of these two-way guys like some run. Maybe I'm just thinking optimistically. Perhaps there's that desire for trying to scheme up some things that can become staples, especially for like the likes of I know Sixers they get Dalen Terry after he made his way from being traded from the Bulls, and you get Marjon Beauchamp. You would hope Nick Nurse, given his development background, his G League background, maybe that's like he's tapping into his roots to try to find that next like scheme or system that can get the Sixers through the balance of this season.
Well, I do think it's like a little bit wishful to think that they can just pull together some good sets. Like you have that's something that you have to be practicing all season long to nail down. And I won't say that they don't really have. I won't say they have no system. I think people like to dramatize a little bit and say they have nothing. I mean, there's some stuff there. It's just like there's only so many times you can re-angle a ball screen before it's like it's pointless. And there's some teams that are running these intricate, horn sets that evolve into a pick and roll on one side with a pin down another, and it's like beautiful symphonic basketball. And there are other teams where it's just like isolation, DHO. That's all we got. And the Sixers are one of those teams. So I don't think they can really find it in them to. I think it's too late to start being like, all right, guys, these are how these sets we're gonna get down. But I do think like there is some work on the margins. Like, hey, we're playing. Name your team that has a very good big at the rim. We're playing a team that's very good at denying penetration, that can double Joel, that can throw bodies all over the paint. Let's not shoot 25 threes tonight. Let's get that up to like 40 threes. Yeah. Just so that way you're staying competitive in the math battle. There are so many nights where like without Joel, that is, where their offense just like doesn't really make any logical sense because okay, like the guy who drives your offense is not available, and he's a mid-range mastermind. He's a walking bucket at the rim and at the free throw line and whatnot. So it would make logical sense too. Okay, if we're not going to get the value out of Joel tonight because he's not available, we should just take a ton of threes because we're going to have trouble getting to the rim. This team has rangy defenders on it, and so I'd like to see them be a little bit more modern, take more threes. Don't try to force mid-range shots. Don't drive into three guys. Like if there are three guys in the paint, the obvious answer is to take the three most times. And also just like have out run a floppy action. Like just get it doesn't have to be your best shooter. It doesn't have to be a sniper. It can be any player on your team who is like put practice in taking catch and shoot threes. Just get some movement around the court and set up an open three for somebody instead of just like driving kick game.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have to say that's going back to Kelly Oubre, I would say that's probably one of the things I've enjoyed about Kelly Oubre the most on the Sixers roster is he's at least someone who can consistently get downhill. Yeah. And I feel like in this Embiid era of Sixers basketball, it's always been for some reason a deficit in their roster construction where they just have not had like consistent downhill wings that can force that, frankly, force defenses into rotation and start to create those 3-point shot attempts, those ideal ones where you can find guys on the catch or you can get them coming off some sort of like floppy or pin down or screen. The Sixers are like kind of in that traditional stagnant mode in the offense. That much I do see. So I understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah. And I mean, the personnel isn't perfect. Like we're kidding ourselves if we say that it is. But there's just like meat left on the bone. And you just see like these possessions dry out to a step back long two from Quentin Grimes. And it's like, yeah, he might make a couple of those, but it's just not a productive use of your time. And I think like one of the great things about Kelly, and I think like coming in to his time with Philly, like the perception was he's a guy who's an inefficient 20 points a game, but he can get 20. He's an athlete, whatever. And he has really worked to maybe not totally change that, but to be like, hey, I can contribute at a high level on a team that has aspirations of something. And like they ran a great play. He's been a great cutter for them. They ran a great play for him last night off of a sideline out of bounds, where it was like an inbound pass and then Cam Payne set a back screen for him and he cut baseline and got a dunk. It was beautiful. And then like for a guy who is so reliant on his left hand as Kelly is, it's kind of remarkable that he can get downhill and get towards the rim as often as he can. Like all you have to do is sit on his left hand and make him use his right, and he won't do it. And yet he still finds ways to knife his way to the basket and overpower guys and just bully you. So he's definitely transformed his game a little bit since coming to Philly.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe when he arrived, it's just like he just read the room. He figured out exactly what kind of niche he could carve out for himself, where his impact would be felt in very like pronounced positive ways. So I definitely respect what he's done in a Sixers uniform. So lots of work to be done for whatever the trajectory the Sixers have with the remainder of the season, and again, whatever their postseason looks like. Sort of taking, I guess, like at this point, sort of like a 3/4 retrospective view on this season. I mean, let's talk about Tyrese Maxey for a moment, because in spite of some of all the ups and downs of the season, and obviously him being sidelined now, he really has put together a masterpiece of a season for himself. I've watched him since he's a rookie, and to see his transformation, I mean, the first level up for him obviously was like, the MIP, winning most improved player. But now, there are flashes at this point in the season where like he was a legitimate MVP candidate in some of his output. Like, what have you taken away from his improvement, his level up from this season when he's been on the court?
I think one thing is we talk so much about like point guard. Is he a point guard? Is he not a point guard in Philly? And I think like it doesn't really matter, because there aren't really, truth be told, are not that many point guards in the NBA anyway.
No.
Like Chris Paul was one of the last couple real point guards that there was. So I don't think it really matters if he's a great gifted passer or pass first guy, whatever. But I do think he's gotten better at passing with pace. He has really worked the mid-range game. His biggest development to me is the mid-range game. That was something that he had a little bit coming into the league, but that was mostly a product of him not having a consistent or confident three yet. And so he would take middies, he'd take floaters, he'd get to the rim because people didn't know him. And then the scout changed a little bit in year 2 because he was playing more and he got more reliant on the three. And then he just became a very good 3-point shooter very quickly. But like he is shooting 42% on long mid-range jumpers this year, which is like average to mediocre. He actually shot it a little better last year from mid-range, which I didn't think I would have expected, but he only took 75 of them last year, whereas this season he's taken 137. So much more volume, much more confident there, making more of them, even if the efficiency has naturally dropped a little bit. That's become a go-to shot for him. His floater has been dynamite most of the season. He's shooting only 41% on short mid-range shots, which isn't great for a guard. But he's taken 278 of them. And last season he took 216. Year before that, 340. Year before that, 205. So I mean, he's taking a ton of shots that are between floater range between the foul line and the restricted area, give or take. The other thing he's been excellent at is the rim. Career high at the rim this season by far. So I think those developments have really opened the game for him. His 3-point shooting has fallen back a little bit as the season has gone on, but early on in the year he was a dead eye. sniper. And even on the open ones, he's still maintained pretty good efficiency from deep. But I think his life is just made so much easier by having this might be crazy, but having his teammates available. Like,
yeah, imagine that.
like Joel, the gravity that Joel has is incredible to him. The gravity that Paul has as a shooter can change his life a little bit. I mean, we probably wouldn't have the same conversations we have about Jamal Murray if it weren't for Nikola Jokic. And that's not a slit on Jamal. It's just like a guard that is that, unless that guard is Anthony Edwards size or has Anthony Edwards athleticism, you're just not you can only solve so many problems by yourself eventually. And having a player of Jokic's or having a bigger player that has that level of gravity can just change your life. And so I think he's done about as well as you could have possibly hoped for the inconsistent availabilities of his two best teammates. But early in the year, I mean, he was the reason they were winning games like, straight up by himself.
Yeah, I think that's an astute analogy, though, when you talk about the two-man game that Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic have had traditionally, because when the sort of the bread and butter for them for season, like many seasons now, has been the top of the key Jokic DHO, where like Murray's coming downhill and it's like a wind tunnel basically once he gets the ball. It's like just straight, unless it's a very like stout defense, Murray's getting to the rim off of that DHO. And at the same time, like when Embiid's been on the floor with Maxey, I've noticed that myself where like they have really perfected for them a good two-man game where it's usually like early offense for them when they do that get sort of action to find like a spot for either one of them. So I think that's incredibly important for Maxey as he's evolved this season is really having so many of those reps with Joel over the last few seasons where like they have a good foundational two-man game that Maxey can play off of.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the simplest way to say it is like if a Dem Bona comes and has to pick for Tyrese Maxey, you're gonna put two on the ball because you're just not afraid of a Dem Bona hurting you in space. And that's gonna slog your offense down because you're putting two on the best player. If Joel's at the screen for Maxey, well, if you switch it, you're going to have a guard on Joel. He's going to punish that every time. If you switch it, you're going to have a big on Maxey who he can probably beat to the rim most times. If you hedge it, you're just going to string it out and then he's going to make the pass back to Joel for the two-man game midi. If you just fight through, he's going to get an open pull-up three. If you miscommunicate, it's an open pull-up three. If two go to Joel, it's an open pull-up three. If two go to Maxey, open shot for Joel. So it's like just having believe it or not, having two potent people in the two-man game really just messes with the defense.
Yeah, it's just sort of nearly limitless permutations of what they get out of that. And it's very much like it's like an option play on NFL field for in a lot of ways when you think about it, because it's just like you can't. There's no perfect coverage for that.
Yeah, and I mean, like I think like the perfect coverage for that is like if you had two guys that were 6'8", that could guard the ball and could guard the big. I don't see the Thompson twins on one team together, so I don't know how
exactly.
I don't know how you're gonna pull that off. But yeah, I mean, and like I think when you have a Paul George to the mix, like okay, it doesn't have to be that creative of an action, but you're creating these like, do you blitz the ball? Do you put two on Joel on the roll? So there's three guys involved in a two-man action, and then suddenly it's like, well, there's two defenders between three guys left on the floor, and someone's getting an open three somewhere, or someone's getting a cut and a dunk somewhere. And I think it's just like it simplifies the offense so much, and it simplifies your shot quality so much when you have all those dynamics. But when it's just Tyrese, it's like very simple. You just two guys on the ball and make literally anybody else beat you. And if they had, consistent competence at at their players, behind Maxey, it would be a punishable sin to put two on the ball every time. But without Joel, they've mostly been waiting for like a Quentin Grimes heater or for someone to go on have a berserk night shooting the ball or whatever, and they just don't have that talent. And I don't know if it's a matter of not having the talent or not having the creativity to manufacture open shots.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, that's an interesting sort of trade-off when you frame it that way because I mean the reality given, especially like if you look at it just purely from the financial standpoint, probably isn't a lot of uh like runway for the Sixers to find a creative solution to add more talent. I mean, likely for the foreseeable future, both Joe and Embiid and Paul George are going to be on this roster because of the size of their contracts. Um, when you think about what when both vets, Joel and PG, when they've been on the court this season, at least from the few times I watched them earlier this season, it seems like there has been a concerted effort from both of those vets to understand that like they need to continue to evolve their game to really like let Maxey be a primary focal point and really fuel what they do on the offense. Um, is there some of that you've seen this season where like that evolution is taking place, and then even like thinking ahead for again whatever remains of the season, and really ideally going into the off season, like what do you want to see from Paul George and Embiid to be the best teammates for Maxey to continue to grow and be the focal point?
Well, I think a lot of people would really like talk about like trading Paul George. And I think number one, there are 2 years left on that max deal. He has not played very many games on that max deal. You'll have to give up draft picks to incentivize someone to help you out with that contract. I think he's a too good of a player when available to just send him to to some random team for cap relief. I would probably err on the side of keeping him around, even though you aren't sure about his availability game to game. And I will say, like he's been pretty like beside when he got healthy from his offseason surgery, he did not miss much time at all. It was once he started this season, he was in and he was able to play. And he would only miss time for back to backs, like one of the two back to backs, and then he got suspended. And the suspension has been the biggest weight on his availability this season, really. So I don't know that I would say I'm bullish on his health. I don't know that you can ever be bullish on a 36-year-old with his injury history, but I do think like this isn't a scenario where we're sitting here and we're like, this is 2 years in a row. He's had quad injuries. He's had knee injuries. He's looked like a shell of his former self. Like, no, he looked like he was getting back to a good place before the suspension. As for the chemistry with like Joel and PG, I think they've done a pretty good job of understanding like how to help each other and that they need to help each other. One of the best examples of that is like there was a play that they had gotten better at where it was like on the right side of the floor, PG's in the corner and Joel's on like maybe the right elbow, and it looks like Joel's going to set a pin down for Paul, and then it fakes into actually a back screen by Paul for Joel, and Joel slides to the short corner, and they make the pass over the top, and Joel gets a mid-range jumper out of it, and it was like a very simple, deceptive action, but it was like super super good, and they ran it and they got it down pat. It was very good for them, and that's like a little thing, but that's a guy sacrificing his touch. It could have been his pin down. He could have said like, this is like, I watched Joel isolate the elbow and foul line all game long. I watched Tyrese dance with the ball all game long. This is my time to get a touch. And he actively chose to deviate from the pin down to set a back screen for Joel. And that's like, okay, that's what you have to do in a partnership like this. And so they've made strides. They've gotten better. There's still ways to go. I don't know how much of it is about just the creativity that is, I guess, implemented into the offense at a higher level, versus like them just not having enough time together. I do wish that like I was watching them with a more dynamic offensive mind coaching. And I mean, I think Nick's done an okay job. He's a good dude. But I think he's better known for his defense than he is for his offense. Um, and so I do think like there's like some meat left on the bone there. But in terms of just changing the roster, like I'm inclined to ride it out just because number one, I think you owe it to like Joel has done. Joel has done so much for this franchise, and people would say like, well, they haven't won anything with him. And like, yeah, that's true. He's also one of the 5 best players in franchise history, and he has sat through patiently through a lot of nonsense over the years with them. And as such, you kind of owe it to him to stick by his side when he is going through his lows. So I wouldn't trade Joel, and especially because he was playing excellent up until the All-Star break. Like he was up until he had knee soreness and then shin soreness and then the oblique injury. He was playing excellent basketball. Like it was one of the best stories in the NBA for a couple months there that he had come back and looked the way he did. So I'm not giving up on him. Tyrese is obviously the face of the franchise going forward. VJ Edgecombe is another part of that duo of the foundation. So I'm rolling with what I have. I think in this CBA environment, it's just so hard to build out your role players beyond that because like no one wants to touch second apron. And the ownership in Philadelphia, they can spin it any way they want. The fact of the matter is they've avoided the luxury tax at the deadline 4 years running, whatever it is. Clearly, their priorities are, and I mean, it isn't. I mean, it isn't as if like they were selling on a team that wasn't good enough this year, or like last year was tanking. Like they outright had a team that was in the top 3 of the East 2-3 years ago when they had Harden, and the only move they made was to switch out Matisse Thybulle for Jalen McDaniels, who was out of the league 2 years later, and that got them under the tax. So this is a habitual pattern of them doing that, regardless of the state of the team. So they're spenders, and they're spenders insofar as they spend to get over the cap, but you ask them to spend some money to invest and go into the tax, and they get a little bit shy about that. So I think your best move going forward is prey on the development of VJ Edgecombe. Take your draft seriously. Take your two-way spots seriously. I think one of the best things about this front office, and they've had some ugly moments. They've also had some very good moments. Like they've won a lot of the margins with the two-way contracts. I mean, Dom Barlow has been one of the best two-way players in the NBA up until the time he was converted. Jabari Walker has been a good find for them. Justin Edwards was a good get as an undrafted free agent. They've had some good wins in the minimum pools over the years. So I think continue to go in that direction if this front office stays in place, which remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and I haven't thought much about like what is the current state. I mean, yeah, principally like Daryl Morey, but there are other players involved. I mean, are there terms that are coming up, or end of contract situations for the Sixers front office?
Well, I think Daryl got extended a couple of years ago. I mean, in the NBA, you don't. It's not like in the. It's not like with players where the contract terms as soon as they come out.
Yeah, it's not always transparent with that
Yeah,
level.
I think with the general rule of thumb is coaches get 5-year deals or 4-year deals or whatever it is. I don't know what GMs or president of basketball operations typically get, but I think Daryl has years left on his deal. What the next course of action is. I mean, I think a lot of it will be telling as to how the rest of the season plays out. I'm inclined to believe that you don't trade Jared McCain for a draft pick when you already ducked the tax by trading Eric Gordon, unless you aren't relatively secure in your job. Like that just doesn't I don't think you would do that. I don't see why you would make a move that is more geared towards a future that might not involve you unless you don't have some level of assurance that you'll be there. So we'll see. Um, I do think there are jobs on the line, though. I won't say whose jobs that they are, but I think it's pretty obvious if you follow the conversation in Philadelphia who has the high and the low approval ratings amongst the fan base.
Interesting. Well, I wanted to go back to that point that you're making about the margins because I agree with you, and again, I just don't see a logical path in terms of like a big trade to really shake up or change the roster. I mean, it is what it is in that regard. So I mean, the Sixers really have to like lock in on trying to be as effective as they can be with the quote unquote margin type of moves, and so um, really leveraging Delaware to try to find like, some roster depth there because I think of a team like, I mean, we look at what, to the Sixers credit, they have drafted incredibly well over the last, like, honestly, you people can I would say this, people can feel how they want to feel about Ben Simmons, right? But I mean, even going back to the process, right? It's a dividing line for a lot of people, but at the same time, it did turn around the fortunes of that franchise and brought them back to relevance. The draft pedigree, I think, in the Sixers, it gets probably too much like notoriety for tanking, but it is a process that yields results. And you have a Max and you have a VJ Edgecombe right now. So what I'm thinking of is like what drafting paired with good margin moves really does. And you look at what the San Antonio Spurs have done this season. Certainly you get Wemby, and that solves a lot of problems. But I believe that organization has done incredible moves with generating like real depth to where it isn't talking about, oh, they're playoff title contender. I mean, they're in line to potentially win it all this season because of what they've done with their depth and the kind of second unit they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a fascinating conversation on team building. I think the Spurs and the Thunder are two excellent examples of the way that the league needs to look at it. I don't think Delaware is, or G League in general, is much of a place to go to farm talent. I just don't think. I think players that are there for a reason, and it's usually not. I mean, 97% of the time, it's not to get called up to the NBA. I think undrafted free agency is an excellent road to go down. I think overseas is an excellent road to look at. But I think like I've asked Mark Daigneault about this when he was in Philly last season, and I asked Mitch Johnson about this when he was in San Antonio, visited last week. And like the commonality was basically like, you don't go into this trying to force your ideal or your system onto the players. You go into this saying, these are the players that we have, and we're going to mold this to them. And Daigneault used a really good word there that I liked. It was we don't discriminate, which I think is a good way of saying like we don't paint ourselves into a box of like they have to have these requisite skills. We can train and coach and teach guys to shoot who put the time in. We can coach guys in how to become better playmakers, better screeners, better rebounders. The things you can't teach are athleticism, length, work ethic, the motor, the desire to like fight. And I think like that's how you get a team like in Oklahoma City, where, you know, they don't come in prescribing a way of building a team. They come in egoless, number one, because they're not trying to, say this is how we do things. Like they say, this is the pool of players we have. These are their talents. We're going to teach them. We're going to mold them, but we're also going to mold our system to them. And I think that's how you find value, cost-effective value in this day and age of the NBA.
Absolutely, yeah, because it should really be that sort of symbiotic type of development where the unique abilities of the player, the organization recognizes that, and they use their development infrastructure to really cultivate that and bring that out of the player, and then at the same time, for what sort of system contributions they can make to help that player be perhaps better in quote unquote basketball IQ or some of the other things. Like there's a true partnership in it versus like one way or the other of you know it has to be all about that player or it has to be all about that organization.
Yeah, I think like Oklahoma City and San Antonio are blessed with two very unique personalities for their players. And I mean, we can talk all day about like why that is. I think it's no coincidence that it's a French guy and a Canadian guy who are like that. Like I think American-born players it's just a different culture coming up here in the States, and you have different value systems. You have access to different resources. There's a different level of entitlement coming in, I think, to the NBA that exists here. That just isn't the way that they're brought up at a young age in other places. I mean, I was talking to someone about this for a story I wrote on BJ Edgecombe, and one of the first things they said is like he's got a unique value system. He's an Islander. He's from the Bahamas. He's not an American-born player, and I like I don't think it's controversial to say that. Like between the AAU programs that we have here in the States and the NIL system that is here in the States, and I guess the way that parents or people who are influential adults in young players' lives can just up and say like, this coach isn't playing you the right way. We're going to take you to a different program, or we're going to play you at a level below because you're going to play more there. Like I think like the stars that are governing the league now, Wemby, is an incredibly mature, intelligent 20-year-old who just doesn't present himself the way that American-born 20-year-olds do. Shea is the biggest face in the small market NBA town. And he's an MVP, likely to be two-time MVP. He does not carry himself like that. And so I think I think those two teams are unique in that they're blessed with those two players who are just so different than your average American-born star. But that doesn't mean like the system shouldn't be copied. I think it's absolutely the way that you go going forward. I mean, it's not rocket science that San Antonio has a better history than Oklahoma City, but two small market NBA teams are at the top of the league right now. It's not a secret, or it's not a coincidence.
Yeah, because in both of those organizations, both San Antonio and Oklahoma City, you see organizations that have prioritized, I would suppose, like just being honest about their circumstances in terms of like how perhaps top talent will view that organization. I mean, they're not going to be a free agent destination probably ever. So I mean, they have to be sharp and they have to be um, like as efficient as possible with their draft process and the kind of trades they negotiate to where I mean they're bringing in net assets every single transaction, right? Like not surrendering picks. They've just been very diligent in at least on those two fronts. And then yeah, there probably is like to your point, some secret sauce in terms of like their player evaluation, the type of mentality they're looking for, where they're more you could put it on that spectrum of like a team guy versus like individualistic guy, I suppose. And you certainly see that influence from a SGA and a Wemby, where they're really like contributing to that culture.
Yeah, and you're right. They're not going to be free agent destinations for the most part. Like I do think there are some I think there are some stars that have that upside, that have that charm about them that make high-level players, when they're mulling moves to different places, make them circle those names. Like De'Aaron Fox circled San Antonio, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is like I think when you're not a destination, like you have to go homegrown. And there's Aaron Wiggins, there's Isaiah Joe, who was a Sixer until he got cut heading into the season, and then Oklahoma City picked him up on a non-guaranteed multi-year deal. OKC finally just traded a first for Jared McCain. So you're right, they don't trade draft capital. They use that as cost-effective means to keep their roster cycling through. And then occasionally they'll splurge on a need. Like they gave Hartenstein a $30 million per year deal to be a backup big. But I mean, I also think there's like a massive element of luck there. Like San Antonio just happens to get the number 1 pick the year that Wemby is the draft pick. They get number 2. They win 30. I think they won 34 games last year. They get number 2 overall. Or no, they won. No. They got number 1, and they got Stephon Castle.
They got back-to-back ones. Then this past draft was the second one with Ron Harper.
Thought it was
Dylan Harper.
I thought it was 1. It was a 1, and then it was a back-to-back 2.
Or was it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe it was 4. 1, 4, 2, I think it was. But point being that they got 2 rookies of the year, I think, in like back-to-back drafts. So there is luck involved there. Oklahoma City traded Paul George for a SGA and a bevy of picks, right? So they lucked into like SGA developing into this unbelievable superstar. But like they also drafted J. Will. They drafted Chet. They picked up Big J. Will. They, AJ Mitchell, like Lou Dort. Yeah. Countless examples of players that are meaningful rotation players for them, who they saw they saw intangibles in, and they just molded them into something else.
Yeah. I mean, by far probably the cherry on top. I mean, they weren't. Oklahoma City was not shy at all about trading Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso, which absolutely was a masterpiece of a trade from their point of view.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair for sure.
Yeah, because some organizations would just stick, like, they'd be like, oh, that's our homegrown talent. We'll just like pay him this cheapo restricted free agency deal and see what happens. But just again, the efficiency of like they're not letting a roster slot like sort of like languish there.
Well, I think there's also something to be said for knowing when to pull the plug on your own draft pick. And like Oklahoma City could have said, like, we've invested a lottery pick in Giddey. We're going to ride this out. But they also saw like, hey, we couldn't have him on the floor in the playoffs because he couldn't shoot. And it takes a level of like a similar concept, like a level of humility to say, like, this is now the time to sell on this prospect or on this player and go get a better fitting piece. And I mean, an adjacent example of that, like, could the Sixers have said, we are selling on Ben Simmons after year 1 and gotten Kawhi Leonard and then gone on an unbelievable run to win a title? And then the whole last decade of Sixers basketball is talked about differently.
Yeah.
Like there's a level of organizational humility that you have to display to not only build the system around the pieces instead of building the pieces or finding the pieces that fit the system, but also knowing when to view your players through this objective lens.
Yeah. Or even more, like another flavor of that probably is even more like of a what if, unfortunately, is like if the Sixers would have found a way to deal Ben Simmons in order to keep Jimmy Butler, like what would that have looked like?
Yeah. That's heavy stuff. I mean, we can talk for hours about how that all went down. Obviously, I think if there was more centralized power structure in the front office at that time, I
Yeah,
think the move would have been to re-sign Jimmy and figure out the relationship between Ben and Jimmy later. But there's no question that like you let an absolute bulldog out of the building, and it was a terrible decision.
yeah, yeah. That one, that's more than anything else. I think that's gonna go down in the histories of Sixers. Sixers them is like that. Probably is the thing that should never happen.
Yeah, I mean, he was an unbelievable fit for this city, like just like a wildly good culture guy, like effort, energy, built for the moment, like all the things that Philadelphia thrives on. He was the exact type of personality to be here, and he was 6'7", uh, a a a good ball handler, a good creator, um, never afraid of the big moment. And it'll go down as like one of the biggest regrets of this era that they let him walk out the building, because I mean they're not um, they're definitely not taking that Toronto team to 7 games without him. And if that Kawhi shot doesn't bounce the way that it did, and they end up winning the game, I mean, who's to say they don't go on win the title?
Yeah, exactly. Let's finish on this because this is actually I think it's a good way to tie all together because I mean a good recurring theme I've definitely noticed. Um, there's like even from what I've seen just in the last 2 games, right? There's probably some reasonable criticism about Nick Nurse's coaching. Um, again, about 3/4 of the way through the season. Um, what would be one thing that you're appreciating about Nick Nurse this season? And then what's Nick Nurse really need to get serious about if the Sixers are going to do anything beyond a playing game for the rest of the season?
Uh, I think one thing I've really appreciated about Nick, not just this season, but his time in Philly, um, I think his personality was a very stark contrast to Doc Rivers, and Doc Rivers will never get the proper amount of due credit for his time in Philly, um, because number one, they didn't win, didn't get past second round. Number two, like constantly just the a, a constant like wrong thing to say guy to in the media, and that soured how everyone felt about him. But Nick is just like this very humble guy who doesn't need to talk about his resume as a coach or his path as a coach. He doesn't feel the need to condescend reporters or be disrespectful when you question him. He will. There'll times when he'll look exasperated and be a little bit short, but he will not actively like go back at you the way that Doc would. So I've always appreciated that about Nick. And it does make it a little bit difficult to be like you want the person to succeed. Having said that, like I think it's like there's like a laundry list of things that I would do differently. Number one, I probably wouldn't have Andre Drummond in the rotation going forward at all. And I think like it's too late probably to revamp this offense in a way that like you're running some really like militant type sets and like doing like what Jordan Knott's doing in Phoenix. But they do love to overhelp on drives, and it just drives me crazy. It drives everyone around me crazy. They do it on the strong side. They do it on the weak side. They overhelp all the time, and it leads to open threes. And I think a lot of like the blowouts that they have could be mitigated if they were just like, you know what, we're not going to help at all. We're just going to, we're going to live with you getting beat one-on-one and accept that they might get a layup out of it, or they might get a shot at the rim, but we are not going to surrender open three after open three. We're not going to get into rotation by over helping and then leaving the backside open for kick out passes. I think if they did that, they would give themselves better chances on defense night in, night out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something to be said about that because at least from that standpoint, you could potentially, especially with like, sort of this middle and the back of the rotations getting like a lot more clock than probably expected because of the injuries, like drive some accountability in those players, right? And just like kind of raise the bar, raise the expectation. Like, no, the help is not coming for you on that drive. Like, just like, you gotta fight it. You gotta fight. You gotta be there and provide some level of resistance.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a big believer in like shot quality, and like probably makes me an analytics nerd, and I don't really care. But in theory, like, yeah, a shot at the rim is a very high percentage shot, and coaches would tell you like, I don't care, we have to take away the rim, and fine, 4 points or a 95% chance at 4 points does not hurt you, or may not hurt you as much as a 50% chance at 6 points. And that's what's happening. Like they're losing the math battle night in, night out. And even if you would say to yourself, I will live with the odds that one guy will miss one open three. Sure. You are more likely, you are 60%, even the best shooters are going to miss 60% of their threes, right? But how many, that doesn't really, math doesn't add up when you're factoring in one team taking 43s in a game with, when Josh Okogie is one shooter and another shooter is Steph Curry. Like, eventually the shot value from your 45% 3-point shooter is just too high. You have to take that shot away. And they don't do that enough for me.
Yeah. So yeah, they need to have perhaps a bit more judgment about like when are we really like committing to taking away the rim versus like actually we need to take away this 3-point line tonight. Because even last night, right? Like, going back to the earlier point you made, Sixers have a problem with the third quarters. And they definitely had that last night against the Grizzlies because I mean, for whatever perhaps the Sixers thought they might be doing in terms of taking the rim, the Sixers got to the rim like they're 6 or 7 from the rim in that third quarter, and something's got to give there. If the help isn't helping, then yeah, you probably should just play it straight up.
Yeah, and I mean, we can talk about like, I mean, I'm probably biased in the sense that I've covered a lot of games. I've seen a lot of box scores. I've seen a lot of opponents shoot 20 of 45 from three against them. And, they're getting shellacked. And it feels like it happens to them more often than it does to other teams. But you simply will see teams lose more games shooting 60% on twos, but 18% on threes, then you will see teams shooting 45% on threes and 50% on twos, whatever it might be. Like, taking away the 3-point shot is an immensely valuable defensive concept, and I just don't think that, like, I know they don't do it nearly enough.
Yeah. Because I mean, it goes both ways also. Because sometimes also Sixers aren't going to have a like Cam Payne perfect from 3-point shot kind of performance either. Like the volume, like I'm with you in that regard because I do find that because of how much 3-point shooting exists in this league now, it's not necessarily to me like that death blow of an advantage anymore. Like every team has like their ebbs and flows with how they're shooting from 3-point line. So I mean, it just needs to be more judgment about them. Like from my point of view, in terms of how defenses are scheming that, where I don't think it has to be completely selling out, like protecting the rim. If yeah, you have hot shooters on the 3-point line, and vice versa. Like if you know the guys are not shooting, probably shouldn't like be all that concerned about sending to a 3-point shooter like on a closeout.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for them it's a special situation because their 3-point shooting is so severely lacking that like if you fall behind the 8 ball shooting threes, like you're just not going to get yourself back into games. And other teams have that ability because they have volume 3-point shooters. Sixers don't have that, so if they are 6 makes behind the opponent from deep, that's going to be a pretty big deficit for them. The other thing is like I think you can find this balance between helping at the right time and helping too early. Like if you're helping when the ball handler has already committed to going up, then okay. Like if they make an unbelievable pass at the rim out to a 3-point shooter and he burns you, okay. If you are helping before they've even gotten both feet in the paint and and the coverage is telegraphed and you're basically funneling the ball out to the weak side for a 3, you're doing a bad job.
Yeah, because the lead ball handler is going to read that, and they're going to know exactly where they need to get the ball now because they see where your feet are.
Even if you're not a lead ball handler, like anyone who just has a good feel for the game, this guy is coming over to shade me. That means someone's open elsewhere. Where am I looking? And then, I see my teammate across the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, you simplifying the game for that ball handler at that point.
I mean, and the third dimension of this is if he makes that pass out to the corner and then that guy draws a closeout and it's a heavy closeout and then he attacks the closeout and the guy shifts over to stop the ball. That ball is right back to the guy who was driving originally for a layup because no one stopped to help. Or the big rotated away from the rim, and you don't have anyone dropping down to help on the backside. So there's there's like 6 different dominoes that can go from you mistiming your help or over helping.
Yeah, 100%. Hey man, this has been awesome. I really appreciate having you on, and definitely want to have you back because I can tell you there probably are like many hours of Sixers lore we can dive into, which I do want to do actually because you just jogged my memory on a bunch of stuff because I haven't thought about Thibault in years, honestly. So you gotta get back on here, man.
For sure, anytime. Just hit me up.
Yeah. Before we get out, definitely plug away your work. You're great writing on SI. Anything else like people should know about?
Follow me on Twitter at NBA Krell. I cover the Sixers on the beat. I write almost every day about them. You can follow me on Blue Sky at austinkrell.bsky.social. Make sure to read my team's work at Sixers on SI. We have the day-to-day pulse of the team every day. So check us out. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody give Sixers on SI a follow. I mean, they're writing stuff daily. So, I personally respect anybody who's writing like great content and is out, is fresh, and is daily. So please give them a follow and certainly follow Austin. And I will just leave us with, please like and subscribe to this video and appreciate everybody's been watching tonight. We want to keep, putting out great content like this and, make content that's about actual real basketball. So, Austin, thank you again, sir. Really appreciate having you on and look forward to having you back.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Until next time.